Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 53 of the Lord Nitrochoke MMA Picks podcast. Today, we're going to be breaking down Evloev versus Murphy, UFC Fight Night in London, an event that myself and Will both be attending, so very excited to go through the fights with you. This is the UFC Fight Night London card. It's got a lot of British fighters, of course, up and down the card, and some newcomers to the UFC. We're going to be looking specifically at these fights and going into these ones in more detail. But outside of the fights in red, you guys have any fights you're looking forward to?
Personally, no. The card as a whole feels like it's a card for the fans, but not for the fighters, right? Like there is no real career progression for any of these fighters, apart from maybe the top three there. But other than that, it feels like the UFC just made up a card where they're like, all right, let's just pair up a British person with another person and have them fight, right? It's a typical country versus opposing country kind of fight. We saw it in Australia just a few weeks ago, and I'm getting a little bit bored of it, really, because in my opinion, at least, there's not that much talent in the UK on the UFC roster anymore. Like there are names there, but it's far and few. I guess all of the talent is just like there already on the screen, as you can see. But it would have been good if like Paddy Pimblett could have fought, but he can't because he's probably still recovering from the Gaethje fight. So it just feels very underwhelming. And when you look at the odds for each of these fights, you can really see how one-sided it is, according to the odds makers and some pundits out there. So yeah, it's just a regular old card that is mildly disappointing in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The one thing you want as a fight fan is, at the very least, is majority competitive fights, and they haven't done that here. You're also right about like the UFC talent. They used to historically. There's always been like 3 different levels of UFC talent. There's been like the top 15ers, some decent guys in the middle, and then some like cans. Whereas these days, it feels like every UFC fighter is either a top 15er or like a quote unquote prospect that the UFC are trying so hard to push. Like Luke Riley as a co-main is an obvious like attempt for them to try and create Pimblett 2.0, which is fine, but like from a customer perspective, I don't want to see that as a co-main event. It's just lazy. So yeah, I think the UFC have gone too hard recently with these local shows in terms of trying their hardest to appeal to the fan base that's attending the fights. Like the Mexico card for me was the worst one. Like having so many fighters who are like minus 600. Like I don't want to watch a showcase. Like that's one of the things that's always made the UFC more interesting than boxing, is that you don't get so many squash matches. But cards like these are having so many of them these days that it's just not entertaining. And I feel disconnected from like a lot of who the UK fighters are on this card, like compared to how it used to be. Like, Nathaniel Wood would always be a guy that you would care about and want to see like perform from a UK perspective. Whereas like they're trying to push Luke Riley and Kurtis Campbell on me on the main card, but I barely know who these blokes are.
Oh man, that's somewhat of a buzzkill, isn't it? I'm looking forward to the card. But I completely understand what you guys are saying. And yeah, the dig at British MMA. Yeah, I guess we're not in the best spot with Paddy Pimblett losing and obviously Leon Edwards tailing off. But yeah, I mean, you've got to give new UK fighters a chance, and at least we've got Mason Jones here. I think he's always in good fights. So, and like Nathaniel Wood, he's not one of the people we're talking about today, but I just thought I'd mention him because I think he's always been a very good MMA fighter and maybe underrated. They're feeding him to the wolves. He's fighting Lozeni Keita from Belgium, who's basically a KO artist. So I think there are some fights here that intrigue me, and I think of course the main event has implications for that division, like big implications, I think. Or you could argue against that, of course, depending on the outcome and how the fight goes. So I think that's a good segue into the main event.
Yeah, so based off everything I just said, this main event really does contradict that because it's a high-profile fight that, I mean, I would call it a number one contenders fight, but let's be honest, no one really knows what's going on at featherweight these days because some guys are just way more entertaining than others. And on the subject of entertainment, these are the two least entertaining fighters. I think that when all is said and done at the end of the year, from a fan base perspective, the two fighters you wouldn't want to see holding the belt are Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy, who they have squaring off against each other. It's rare that you'll get guys who are this high up in the weight class rankings who are still undefeated. So this is actually like quite a momentous fight for the occasion. But I think that people are just sort of a bit bored of seeing them win decisions over and over again, and that's exactly what we've got. They're both quite well-rounded. Evloev is definitely the more well-rounded from an offensive point of view. His striking is underrated, I think. He is very competent from a minute-winning perspective, and he's happy to go toe-to-toe with a lot of guys. But obviously, his main work is done in the wrestling realm. He has very good takedowns and decent enough top control, but the cardio to competently mix all of the aforementioned statistics together to basically just put on a smothering performance. I think that a lot of the good stuff that Evloev does is actually almost hypnotizing his opponents into being terrified of all of the things he can do, that they kind of freeze up a little bit against him, which kind of allows him to bridge the gap if his striking is on the weaker side. So yeah, I think Evloev is a very well-rounded guy, but obviously, as we know, lacks any sort of real finishing potential at all. So I think for him, obviously, dragging this fight late and going for 25 minutes would be the most desired path, I assume. This is his first 5-rounder in the UFC, I believe, but I do think he has previously fought 5 rounds for another promotion. I've not watched it, so I can't comment on how his cardio held up. But one thing I did find really interesting when I was doing the tape on this one, and also just looking at all of the statistics and like media scorecards and stuff, Evloev's actually not as much of a like cardio machine as you may originally think. Like I personally look at him as somebody like Patterson or Merab Dvalishvili, and that now he's getting the opportunity to fight 5 rounds, it's going to really help him. But that's actually not the case, because he has lost the 3rd round and won 29-28 against some of the more competent guys he's fought. And by that, it's Arnold Allen, Hakeem Dawodu, and also one judge gave Diego Lopes the 3rd round in their fight. So it's tricky because like Evloev's got so many decisions under his belt that you'd say, well, you know, he still wins round 3 more often than not. But he's so much better than most of the guys he's fought that it just concerns me that now he's finally coming up against the tougher guys. And by the way, like Hakeem Dawodu is actually a very good fighter. Like it just concerns me a little bit that like there's a little red flag there, and that he seems to taper off when he gets to the 15-minute mark. So I'm suddenly not convinced at all that he's actually going to be the one who has the advantage going into championship rounds, which pre-tape and pre-research I would absolutely have assumed. Whereas Lerone Murphy, on the other hand, has had 25-minute fights already in the UFC. I believe his one against Edson Barbosa was 25 minutes, and definitely his one against Josh Emmett was 25 minutes as well. My issue with Lerone Murphy is that he just underwhelms me. he's a decent fighter, but he's so focused on what his opponent is doing that he only ever seems to fight in response, if that makes sense. Like you never see him walk forward and push a pace. You only ever see him against the fence. It's like he's so concerned by processing what his opponent is doing to him and then, you know, throwing whatever offense he wants to in response to that he actually does nothing to build his own campaign for winning the fight. It's a trait I always hate to see in fighters, and I think Lerone Murphy is one of the worst examples of it. And when you go back to what I was saying about how Evloev is so diverse and has so many like things to throw at you and angles that he can take the fight, it kind of concerns me that Murphy's going to get overwhelmed in that kind of passive state of processing. But the one thing that people have all been talking about, which I think is a very, you know, kind of has to be addressed, is Lerone Murphy's takedown defense. I think it sits in like the 50-something% range, which is insanely bad for a guy of his caliber and a guy like in this high profile of a fight. He's been taken down 4 times by multiple opponents. Josh Emmett was one of them. The other names escape me, but it's literally there's been 4 UFC fighters that have done that to him, and I think that's quite criminal at this stage. Obviously, it implies he has very good get-ups, and he does, but either way, I think it's still like it's kind of hard to sort of see a guy winning rounds when he can just give up a takedown just like that. But then on the flip side, as I just said about Evloev potentially having questionable cardio, if he's going to go back to the well and attempt takedowns on takedowns on takedowns and not have any like long-standing success with time on top, that could sap his cardio even more. So I do think that there are sort of question marks about the championship rounds here, and having 25 minutes to work with kind of does make me a bit concerned that Evloev may struggle if the fight plays out a certain way, which I kind of struggle with. But at the end of the day, like obviously I've thrown a lot of information out there with no sort of coherent angle that I'm talking about, because I think this is quite a competitive fight. So there are 2 bets that I have personally highlighted for this one, and they are contradicting, but there's a reason for it. So I have 2 bets for this fight that I'm considering. One I have placed and one I probably will place later on in the week. They are contradicting, which kind of makes things a bit confusing. But the first one is Evloev to win by decision at +100. Whilst I think the money line is wide, and I don't think that Evloev should be -250, I think it's strange that there's like a 20% gap between Evloev's decision route and him overall winning. I don't give him 20% to win this fight. So I find that very strange. I don't give him 20% to win this fight inside the distance, which I find very strange because, 71% is the likelihood of him winning according to the betting odds, but 50% by decision. It just seems strange to me. I think if Evloev does win, it's almost certainly going to be via decision, given that he isn't going to have some sort of massive cardio edge down the stretch, I don't think. But on the flip side, Lerone Murphy, therefore, I think is the only one who has any sort of finishing upside. I don't expect him to find a finish, but he is an explosive guy and he can land things out of nowhere. We saw that when he kneed Makwan Amerikani at the start of a round. What he did to Pico was obviously very sort of like out of nowhere. So I think if any guy is going to be finishing, I'm pretty sure that's going to be Lerone. So getting finish only at +140 obviously would be a push if Evloev wins by decision. So I think that's 2 very likely outcomes on other sides. Getting plus money on the ability to play both guys, most likely path to a win, I think. Actually, maybe not most likely on Lerone's side, but I think the push is probably most likely there. So yeah, those are 2 angles I very much want to weaponize here. But yeah, it's a confusing fight overall. I haven't really said anything super coherent there, just a whole lot of points that I've just sort of thrown out there. So does anyone have any more of a conclusive way of breaking this one down? Josh, take it away. What do you think?
When it comes down to this fight, the only conclusion I can kind of like see is an Evloev sloppy wrestling fight against Murphy. Like I know that Evloev's like entire definition as a fighter is his cardio and his wrestling, but there is one little problem with that, and I believe that stems from Evloev being sick for the past year. He has been ill for like months at a time recently, which is why he didn't fight last year. I wonder if he is going to be able to keep up a high pace, during this fight, this very, very no doubt pivotal fight in his career. As for Murphy, I struggle to really break down Murphy because outside of his like highlight reel wins, he doesn't really seem to be a very, I don't want to say a very good fighter because he is a good fighter, but like not a elite level fighter. He's good, he's fine, but he's also fighting people who aren't on that upper echelon anymore, right? Like we got like Edson Barboza, who is hitting the end of his career by the time they fought. Dan Ige, who has always been a stepping stone for contenders and champions. Josh Emmett, who, as we saw last week, is no longer even there anymore. He was done a while ago. And then Aaron Pico. Aaron Pico was a weird case because Pico is young still. He is I think an NCAA champion or whatever. Like he is an elite level wrestler. And when it comes to watching tape, you want to really watch wrestlers try and replicate what Evloev might do and like how Evloev might get those takedowns going and all that stuff, right? But I feel like no matter what kind of wrestler that Murphy takes on, he still has that chance to create an upset. Like, I mean, as Will said, you know, the very quick KO in the second round against Amir Khani back in 2021. That just came from Amir Khani being a crutch sniffer for most of the fight, and Murphy was like, "Fuck it, eat a knee, bitch." So I think that it's possible that Murphy can finish this fight, but it also stems on how badly Evloev is going to perform, and that means like how much has his illness affected him. Like it was a respiratory thing, it was a virus, I think. You know, maybe similar to what Macy Barber had. You know, in terms of it affecting the immune system, it affecting the camp. Maybe, who knows? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I wish I was. Money's great, all that shit. But I can't get a read on this fight. And if I did, I would have to agree with what Will has there in the potential and place bets. I mean, that makes sense to me. I hope we don't see 25 minutes of two men hugging each other on the floor, because I don't particularly like that. Plus, for me, being a Melburnian in Australia, it's going to be at like 9 o'clock in the morning after 6 hours of watching fights, and no, thank you. No, I'm good. But yeah, that's my take. I'm just curious about how Evloev is going to perform after being sick for so long. What about you, Dom?
Yeah, I think you guys done a great job in summarizing where we're at. I think that, you know, if all things being equal, then Evloev has a clear path to a decision victory. He's not really a finisher. I think he lacks finishes. He's not finished anyone, I think, at the UFC level. And then you've got on the other side a guy who has been grappled before, as you mentioned. And the other fascinating aspect is what Josh just mentioned, the health issues. So the mysterious virus that compromised Evloev, and he thought it was going to end his career. Obviously, we're glad that it didn't. And we're going to find out on Saturday who's going to win this. But in terms of the odds, I do think they're a little bit wide on Murphy. Anything that is close to where he opened, so he opened at like plus 200, so anything above plus 200 on the money line, I think it's a little bit wide. I think it's come in a bit, and it's yo-yoing. But I think there are props you can play. So, you know, I think Will's finish only prop plus 140. I think that's great value, because basically what it's saying is, if you take out the decision outcome from this fight, who's more likely to finish? How can Evloev, who has no UFC finishes, be more likely to finish than Lerone Murphy, who, as Josh referenced, can just suddenly turn it on? Flying knee knockout of Makwan Amir Khani was fantastic, but also spinning back elbow of Aaron Pico comes to mind. He's like very defensively sound, Lerone Murphy, so he doesn't take many risks on the feet, and I think that's why he's sort of flown under the radar. He's not super popular because he doesn't run his mouth. You know, I like Lerone Murphy. I'll be rooting for him. But yeah, I think Evloev decision definitely at 50% plus 100. That's not a bad bet either. So I don't think those two bets are contrary, because they can effectively, you know, synergize in a sense. So I think Murphy's finishing upside. What I like about it is what you said, Will, about Evloev, right? So in 3-round fights, he hasn't looked super convincing in the 3rd round. Not saying he's got bad cardio, but we haven't really seen him in the championship rounds. We have seen Murphy in the championship rounds. So I'm like toying with the idea of Murphy late finish, in addition to the other bets, which I'll go through later. So that's a wrap for the main event. And we'll go on to the co-main.
All right. Well, look, here's the deal here. I don't have a lot to say here. I woke up thinking that, you know, this fight might be ignored because who the hell wants to cover this fight? But as usual, Dom surprised me just a few hours ago when he gave us the slides. And yeah, what is it to say about Riley that isn't really said everywhere else? I mean, look, he comes from the same camp that that Paddy Pimblett comes from, so you kind of want to expect that kind of performance from him. Like he in that camp, they fight aggressively, they train aggressively, and I just envision him doing that in the cage against Aswell. Aswell isn't exactly a very good defensive fighter, I don't think. I believe Aswell is a bit of a standing punching bag at times. And to me, that just tells me that Riley's going to have no problem being the aggressor. He's going to have no problem getting the fight to the ground, because I believe Aswell's stance is pretty tall, so tall stance does not equate to good takedown defense. And I just think that this is a classic case of the UFC setting up a young talent like Riley to defeat a dude named Aswell. And so, you know, like I'm trying to breeze through this because I am hitting blank after blank after blank. So I'm gonna conclude with saying that I think Riley is gonna win this fight via a knockout. It's gonna be a ground and pound based finish, in my opinion, because I don't think he's gonna cleanly knock out Aswell on the feet. I reckon it's gonna be a bit of a mauling on the ground, leading to a TKO. But yeah, how's that for a 1 minute breakdown? I apologize, guys. I am drawing so many blanks. My write-up isn't even up to the main card yet, so I'm like, fuck, what do I say here? Any takers? Will, do you have anything to say?
I was quite keen on Luke Riley when he made his UFC debut. From watching the regional tape, I definitely got a similar kind of inspired feel that I was dealing with a prospect in the same way that I did about Lonnie Kavanagh, which has obviously gone on to look pretty decent a take there. But if I'm honest, Luke Riley's performance against Bogdan Grad, whilst he did win in the second round, I was quite underwhelmed. I expected Grad to come out early and look decent in the first round, but I didn't expect him to look that good. You know, maybe you can put that one down to UFC jitters, etc., etc. I wouldn't have thought so, because Luke Riley's quite a confident guy. But yeah, I don't like to make big reads and conclusions based off small sample size, so I don't want to say too much about it. Aswell is an unassuming fighter. I think there's an asterisk on pretty much all of his UFC fights, and I think that kind of makes him very confusing. I can't even remember his record and who he's fought, but like I know that from like looking at the tape, I was always a bit like, oh, that's kind of strange. I mean, the last one obviously against, was it Almeida? Obviously was a bit of a sus fight because his opponent was injured, and he really should not have lost that one, which was well, he probably could not have lost that one really. So that was a bit of a scratch fight. Balaji Oki, I think he came in on short notice, upper weight class. Which, you know, pretty tough to do. And Oki is obviously not got the greatest cardio, and also kind of falls apart, as we saw recently. But Oki is a dangerous fighter, and Aswell had the better cardio going into that one, which was quite impressive given it was short notice. And then obviously the Bogdan Grad fight himself on Dana White's Contender Series was very, very close. I personally thought he won, but it being a split decision was kind of fine. So yeah, I just don't know, kind of similarly to you, I don't have a whole lot to say about either guy, because Riley's so the expectation versus reality was kind of eye-opening last time, and I don't know if that's a sign of things to come or just a one-off. And Aswell is unassuming, but I think that looking at it from like a betting perspective, you have to acknowledge for this card as a whole, so this kind of applies to this fight, but also a lot of them. Obviously we said at the start this is like a squash match kind of card, but the UFC use UK spots to build prospects. I mean, Paddy Pimblett was being like forced into the eyes of people from the very beginning. And you know, as somebody who's been to a few UFC Londons, like they really do get behind their fighters, and I just don't think Luke Riley should be like, what is he, minus 300 here? But I think if they were fighting on home soil in the US or like on a generic Apex card, the line wouldn't be quite so one-sided. So I think if you're looking at a betting line that's quite wide and it's a UK guy versus a non-UK guy, I would say that the justification for that is mainly due to like popularity and the sports books kind of protecting where all of the parlay volume is going to go, which is the Riley side. So you'd be wise to think about Aswell or pass from a betting perspective would be my summary on this one. But I can't necessarily justify that with like a three-dimensional breakdown of their abilities. How about you, Dom? Do you have anything for this one?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a fight that I definitely need to do more tape on, because but the thing is, I did quite a bit of tape for Riley versus Grad, and at that point, I was actually contrary to what Will said. I did think Riley looked good on tape, but I was questioning his grappling defense. And in the end, I didn't play the grad money line. I really held off. Sometimes I want to bet on dogs and I don't. But what I did play was grad to win the first round, and he did. He just took Riley down, and he pretty much won that round pretty convincingly on all the judges' scorecards. So I had a fairly good read on that fight. What I can remember about Riley is that he's flashy. He's a flashy striker. He gets hit quite a bit. He's not got the best striking defense, but he's pretty quick. He's pretty fleet of foot. And I just think people don't really know anything about Aswell. That's the thing here. So Aswell's got 3 UFC fights, 2 of which he's lost, well, including a Dana White's Contender Series fight. So they got a common opponent. So they both fought Bogdan Grad, and Luke Riley starched Bogdan Grad in round 2, whereas Michael Aswell went to a split decision loss. But we were chatting before we came on here. We thought that maybe was a bad split decision, and that Aswell actually beat Bogdan Grad. But you know, you should never do MMA math. You should never say Riley beat Bogdan Grad and Grad beat Aswell, therefore. And I think that's the big warning sign here. Is I think these odds, as you mentioned, whatever they reached -300 are absurd. Actually, I noticed that money has been coming back in on Aswell. So Aswell reached as high as +250 or 3.5, and now money's coming in on Aswell. And I think that's because people are realizing that this is a closer fight than the odds suggest. That doesn't mean that Aswell wins. As we saw last week, there were a few fights on last week's card where I thought the odds were off, like Oki with Sousa and Sosa with Lacerda, but the favourites still won, and that's sometimes how the cookie crumbles. So I was obviously tempted by Aswell when he reached +250. I was like, you know, this is absurd, because Aswell has very tight striking, so he's pretty defensively sound, and he's got straight shots, 1-2s up the middle. He's definitely going to land on Riley. I can see him potentially winning the first round. Actually, he could be live to win this fight by decision. But I think the bigger shots are going to come from Riley, the more eye-catching moments. And then I just thought to myself, do you know what? This is probably a fight which, you know, I don't think Riley's necessarily going to get a KO. I think it's probably a KO decision, but I think Riley's probably the side. But at the money line, it's not really playable. So in my head, I'm thinking, you know, over 1.5 and over 2.5. Fight goes to decision is -130. It really wouldn't surprise me if it goes to decision. The only thing that's stopping me play something like that is that I like to monitor when fighters arrive, you know, in foreign countries, and Aswell hasn't posted from London as yet. So he did post an Instagram post from Texas 3 days ago. He was training 3 days ago. I just think, like, it's not ideal, right? It's not ideal betting on a fighter who's not yet in the country they're supposed to be in, with, you know, 6-7 hour time difference and acclimatization and so forth. So yeah, I don't have a bet on this fight at the moment. I think Riley's probably the side. I think Aswell's likely being overlooked by the books. Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting. So there, that's my summary. And now we've got a far more interesting fight, I'd say, in terms of competitiveness. We've got 2 fighters here, 2 strikers. Well, I'd say Sam Patterson is more of an all-round mixed martial artist, but Michael Venom Page needs no introduction. Anyone who's familiar with British MMA has probably been aware of MVP for the last decade or so. He's been styling on guys in Bellator. He's a really flashy striker, really good movement, has a very, you know, karate-esque style, hands down, bobbing around, just constantly on the move. And, you know, he makes people look stupid when they don't land on him, when they don't connect with him. And he's only lost 3 times. And his last fight was against Jared Cannonier. He was at middleweight. So interestingly, he's been taking some fights at middleweight. This fight is at welterweight, so he's cutting back down to 170. You see on screen his last fight was at 185. He beat Jared Cannonier. And I watched that fight, and, you know, he made Cannonier look pretty silly, basically. He styled on him for 2 rounds, and it was pretty comfortable, basically. And then he made a mistake. He slipped, and Cannonier got on top of Michael Venom Page, and he won the 3rd round, and it was looking pretty hairy there. I know MVP bettors weren't worried, but I bet on Jared Cannonier there, so it was looking like a pretty silly bet until the 3rd round, and then they looked like there was potential for a finish, but I wouldn't say it was close. But he was landing pretty heavy in the ground and pound on MVP. Sam Patterson is someone who's been streaking in the UFC. He started in the UFC at lightweight, and he was obviously cutting too much weight, and he got caught by Yanal Ashmouz and basically cleanly KO'd in his UFC debut, which is never a good look. But since then, he's been on an absolute tear, finishing everyone he's faced. So he's on a 4-fight win streak, but all these fights have finished in round 1. So it's a pretty hard fight to kind of get a read on, only in the sense that we haven't got a great deal of tape of Sam Patterson at the UFC level. And we know Michael Venom Page is going to be extremely elusive here. He's going to be from the outset skirting around the outside with his hands low, threatening with the jab. Then he'll come in with heavy 1-2s. You know, so like the first strike that MVP threw against Cannonier, dropped him. So he's still got his power at middleweight at least. But the sort of the interesting intangibles here are Michael Venom Page he's aging, of course, as we all do. He's almost 39 years old, and Sam Patterson is in his prime. He's a much younger man. He's 9 years the junior of MVP. And another interesting intangible is that they've trained together on and off for 4 or 5 years. And MVP has come out and said that he didn't really want to fight Sam Patterson, but he must have peed off someone at the UFC because they gave him Sam Patterson, and he was obviously looking for money fights. He wants to fight up. He wants to get the big paydays. Now he's in the twilight of his career, and I think it's fairly straightforward in terms of how this fight will play out. I mean, Sam Patterson has to look to grapple. He's got really decent BJJ. He's got a lot of submissions on his record, and we've seen that when Michael Venom Page gets taken down, the last round of the Cannonier fight, he was taken down by Douglas Lima back in the day. He was taken down by Ian Gary. The rounds that Ian Gary took Michael Page down in, rounds 1 and 3, he won clearly, and it was a clear 29-28 fight. On the feet, that was the round which MVP won. It was interesting, actually. The second round was interesting because whilst MVP was definitely winning that, Ian Gary did have some control against the cage. So I think Sam Patterson basically has to be very... He has to be a pressure forward from the start of this fight. He can't be standoffish. He needs to start fast. He needs to put pressure on MVP, go straight into boxing range, start jabbing him, and look to just get him on the cage straight away. And I think the concern on the Patterson side is his wrestling, right? And that's the concern for all British fighters. We don't have wrestling programs in our schools. We don't, if you want to learn wrestling in the UK, you've basically got to go to an MMA gym. But I think Sam Patterson is this next generation of MMA fighter. He's been in MMA gyms since he was a young lad, and I'm backing him here to get the takedown. I think he is going to take MVP down, if not in the first round, then in the second round, and I think he has the potential for finishing upside. I haven't played him by finish. I'm just taking his money line because at the time that I took the bet, he was in the plus 200 range, which would have put him at 33% implied probability, which I just felt was wrong for someone who I think is very familiar with MVP. He would have definitely looked up to MVP, and I'm sure he does look up to him. But the fact they've been training together for so long means he understands, the enormity of the task in front of him. I thought there was value at this price. That's why I played it. And the line at the moment has gone down to around plus 150. Which doesn't surprise me greatly. I'm expecting buyback on MVP. So I think if you like Patterson, or if you understand the value proposition of Patterson, that you will get this price again, probably on the day of the fight. I think a lot of money will come in on MVP from casual bettors, from people who are fans of him. And it won't surprise me if he just keeps the fight standing and styles on Sam Patterson and styles on him to a decision win. But I really feel like the Patterson money line holds value at this odds. I'd also be interested in Sam Patterson finish no action or finish only, but I haven't looked into that pricing yet. So hand over to you guys. What do you think? Who's the side and who are you betting on? Maybe go to Josh because I know he loves MVP.
Yeah, when I saw that you took Patterson moneyline, I was like, God damn it, Dom. But my argument for MVP here is that we have seen more of MVP than we have seen from Patterson. And I mean, I'm sure all of us can agree here that as writers, as like quote unquote analysts, right? We want to see a fighter struggle. We want to see like someone showcase all of their abilities and all of their deficits in the cage, right? We want to see them a whole, right? Patterson's winning streak has me pissed off a little bit. Like maybe that's a strong term, but I can't care less. it's hard for me to break down what he does well when he finishes all of his opponents really quickly. Like I know that his opponents have been pretty decent opponents, but they've also been really, really crap opponents compared to what MVP has been through. Stylistically, I do think MVP is going to work his magic in the cage. I mean, it's hard to replicate what MVP does in the cage for any training partner of Patterson's. Like, I mean, even if Patterson brought in, for argument's sake, Cannonier or something to help him train up his knowledge of MVP, I still think that you cannot prepare for MVP. It's impossible. Speed, fluidity, unexpectedness, movement, all of those things are going to make Patterson a little bit hesitant, like freeze up a bit in the cage and make him not really be the aggressor, because frankly, if you aggress, well, that's a weird word. If you are the aggressor against MVP, you're going to get punched in the face. It's the way MVP defends attacks, right? He just jabs and moves. I can't see any way that Patterson can win this fight, even if there is arguments that MVP is going to get taken down by Patterson and stuff like that. I do want to point out that even though that Ian Gary took MVP down for what was like 7 minutes total in that fight, most of those minutes were in the first round where MVP wasn't expecting Gary to take him down. And then afterwards, it was a very competitive fight, right? MVP kept the fight standing to a point. He knew what to expect. If Patterson gets MVP down in the first round and doesn't finish him, I don't think MVP is going to let him get the takedown again in the second or third round. I think that MVP is going to be on top of everything afterwards. He's going to let one go in the early round, but then afterwards, boom, he's going to just know what to expect from Patterson, because when you fight MVP, what can you do, right? There's only so many cards that you can play before you run out of cards in your hand, right? So I personally am picking MVP. I praise Dom for going with Patterson, but like, damn, I can't see it, and I'm intrigued. But yeah, that's my kind of a breakdown. What about you all?
Yeah, I pretty much agreeing with Dom's stance on this one. It's not a confident take at all. As far as I'm concerned, it's a little bit of a Hail Mary, because I definitely see pretty much everything that you said, Josh. Like you look at this fight, like even from like impulse when I saw it first got booked, I was very confused that they'd book this one. But it makes sense. Like if you're a top 10, top 15er in the UFC, why would you want to fight Michael Page in London? It sounds like a terrible prospect, you know, like no one wants to go to London anyway if you're from the US, and MVP is one of the hardest, most complicated guys to fight unless you have a lot of experience in fighting him, i.e. you used to be a training partner of him. So it makes sense that Patterson would take it. Also, it makes sense that Patterson would take it because it's a massive step up for him. He wins this fight and he leapfrogs like, you know, what, 15, 20 places in the rankings. Maybe that's too much, but a lot of places in the rankings. But yeah, at a glance, MVP infinitely better as a striker, but like so much more. So you'd be so much more confident in him winning a striking based fight. And Patterson is primarily a guy who likes to strike and not someone who likes to use the full process to get fights to the mat. Usually it's some sort of knockdown or him being taken down that forces him into these grappling exchanges. But it is very true that his grappling, specifically his BJJ, is very good. He is pretty dangerous, but just very opportunistic and very, very active when he's on the mat. So I do think that Patterson on the mat with Michael Page is very dangerous for Michael Page. And that's something that you can't really ignore. So the early stab on Patterson at plus 190, I personally played it for half a unit at plus 200, I think is definitely the side. Like Dom said earlier on, like when MVP fought Cannonier, I was one of the people on MVP, played him at like minus 175, I think. At first, when he got taken down, like when he was on the mat against Cannonier, I was like very happy with it because I knew he was 2 rounds up, and I didn't think Cannonier would like be super dangerous. So I thought it would just be like a nullified 5 minutes. But then when Cannonier actually got going, and I saw that MVP is very vulnerable, suddenly I got very worried, which was quite funny. But like, yeah, it's all about trusting Patterson's process here. If he comes out wanting to put on a statement and he's going to be like, oh, I'm going to be one of the guys to knock out MVP, then yeah, the ticket might as well just get burnt. But if he thinks about this in the same way that we are and knows that he has massive grappling upside and that he's been sort of drilling ways to get past that very tricky, rangy distance of Michael Page and get the fight to the floor, then he's very live, and that money line is very appealing at plus 200. So can't blame anyone for taking a stab on it. I mean, I've taken it myself, but it could look very bad if it's just a striking fight. So small stakes only, I would say, pretty much, in my opinion.
All right. This is another puzzling one for me personally because I don't know who the hell Kurtis Campbell is. I believe he's a Dana White's contender series winner, but outside of that, like, who the fuck is that guy? You know, like, what a weird. I mean, his nickname is the Pink Panther. He's not pink; he's white. Anyway, that aside, I feel like we are going to see another classic case of like the UFC trying to set up a dude for like success, because Danny Silva and his striking defense is a concern. I'm going to breeze through this, so I'll hand it off to Will and Dom in just a matter of seconds, basically. But I've seen Danny Silva fight, and the entirety of his fights have always been him on the receiving end of punches. I know he's won fights and all that stuff, but the ones that he has won has always been by split decision, and I just don't really trust that to be a clean win. It's always one of those weird, yeah, but he was close to losing kind of things, right? I expect to see Campbell just lay hands on Silva here. Silva's striking defense is mostly based around his chin and his durability. I just don't know what Silva can do to get Campbell Page out of there, apart from maybe land leg kicks early and try and slow down the exciting debutant there. But frankly, like, just from a very casual and very basic look at things, because that's who I am these days, apparently, I think Campbell is just set up for a win here. Like, I don't know if you guys did tape on Campbell. Like, I'm sure you did. You guys are probably way more prepared than I am with this one, but I feel like just from a glance, it's just one of those things where the UFC is trying to make Campbell look out to be the winner here, and Silva is probably going to absorb a lot of strikes and maybe lose by decision. I think, like, if we go to my bets that I placed, I forget all of this stuff. I got the memory of a goldfish. I think I placed it as a what was it? It was a Campbell money line and over 2.5 rounds. So that was the two bets that I not placed but recommend. I see. Look, I'm going in circles here. I'm going to hand it off to a more professional person. Any takers? You guys are much more prepared than me.
Go ahead, Will.
I didn't jump out because you asked for a professional person. That's not me. But yeah, I did do tape on Campbell. Just because I mean, usually I don't, I'm very against taking debutants too seriously, but just because he's on a main card, he's English, it made sense for me to have a look at it. And to be honest, very impressive. He's like a lanky Paddy Pimblett, but with better looking striking. He has like quite a rangy kind of straight shots, teep kick kind of style with his striking offense, but it does look like relatively like competent on the feet. He has another reason for the Pimblett comparison. He has Paddy Pimblett's striking defense, i.e. nothing except for just like absorbing shots to the face and just like, smiling, which is always a massive concern. But the thing that I took away from Campbell mostly is that his grappling's really good. He's very diverse, which makes him, kind of a threat in all areas. Wrestling looks pretty competent. And when he's on top, he consolidates position very well, threatens submissions, but basically the full package. And that he's somebody who always looks to be working towards a finish. He's not overly reckless with it, but he's just you get a sense of danger when this man is in a dominant position. But it does also have to be said that Campbell's level of competition, whilst not terrible, is just complete unknowns. Like if you watch the Dana White's Contender Series fight, I can't even remember the name of the guy he fought, but like, where do they find these guys? Like that man would have only had the career of like Blood Diamond if he'd have actually gotten a contract. His grappling looks terrible, but I actually don't know. I didn't actually tape the Danny Silva side because I watched the Curtis Campbell tape and was like, okay, cool. He's like what, minus 200 or something, and like, he looks good, but there's a certain level of competition in the world that I would look good against, and everyone would look good against. Like, it doesn't mean anything that you're beating up people that we don't know, because Danny Silva, firstly, is American. It's probably the first American that Curtis Campbell has fought. Like we mentioned earlier on, British people don't have a background in wrestling. What happens if Campbell can't get his takedowns going? What if Danny Silva's wrestling defense is good enough and is forced into a striking fight? Then suddenly you take away Campbell's best weapon. It doesn't take much for a guy that you don't know much about for your perception of him to completely fall apart, right? So you have to be cautious. I just don't understand how you can really justify Campbell at minus 250. If he's as good against UFC level opposition as he has been on regional tape, then I do genuinely think we've got a very interesting fighter who I dare I say could be a prospect, but like that's a wild statement until we see it against an actual level of competition. So we will know more. This is a fight to learn, not to bet, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't have any action on this one. How about you, Dom? What about you? Got anything?
Yeah, I feel very similarly to both of you that this is again like the Riley fight with Aswell, in the sense the odds are very stacked in favor of the home fighter. So Campbell is sitting at like minus 250 now, similarly to Riley. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense given that Curtis Campbell hasn't had a single UFC fight, and he beat a guy, like you say, from the jungle, literally training in Africa with whatever facilities they have there, and just looked like a fish out of water on the mat. Danny Silva is, as you say, the first American fighter that he's taking on. I'm pretty confident that's correct, what you said. And he's got really good takedown defense. Danny Silva is primarily a boxer. He's got fast hands, and I think Curtis Campbell will need to get this to the mat, and then that's the big question: can he do that or not? I don't think Curtis Campbell has terrible striking, but I think he can be hit. So again, it's like Riley. I mean, you're fighting a compact, tight boxer who's going to land on you. So it's just going to be one of these hairy fights where if you've placed minus 250 on the money line, you're just going to be like biting your fist for the whole fight. But I think Campbell's going to get it done. I think, like you say, it's in London. He's going to have home bias in the judging potentially, but I just don't think that it's a clean finish. Just like I don't think Riley's cleanly going to finish Aswell. I think that both these guys, Silva and Aswell, are very similar in the sense they're very dogged, very tough, but they're both doing the same thing with their camps. They're coming in so late. Like Danny Silva flew in and he said he posted on Instagram that his first training session in London last night. So he posted it really late at night. So I guess he got in yesterday. Ironically, I'm doing the same trip that Danny Silva did at the same time. So I'm flying from California. Danny Silva's based in California. So he landed last night. Right now I feel terrible. Maybe I'll feel fine on Saturday, but the jet lag is pretty severe from the west coast of the US to Europe. So I just don't think they're giving themselves the best chance of success. And I think it's probably financial related, because if you're a fighter in Silva or Aswell's position, you've got to pay for all your entourage to come out and cover their expenses. So it's very expensive. Like if you're not getting paid, multiple hundreds of thousands for a fight, it's not something you can really afford to do. You can't come to London 2 weeks in advance. So yeah, I just don't know. I can't see the Silva side right now, but typically that would be the side that I'd be interested in. So these bets on screen, I'm not sure I could advocate for the money line, but I completely get it. And yeah, I think over 2.5 rounds makes sense as well. But if it's over 2.5 rounds, I think Silva's very live. So I hope that Campbell can get the finish and make it look easy, but we'll find out on Saturday. Okay, this is going to be a fantastic fight. I think that I've been very selfish and I've stolen the two best fights to talk about. I've talked about MVP versus Sam Patterson. And I'm going to talk about Mason Jones against Axel Sola. It's sort of a regional varsity match, if you will. It's the UK against France. We have our rivalry with the French in most sports, and it's no different in MMA. I think this is going to be a great fight. Mason Jones is a walk forward, pressure heavy fighter. He throws with nasty intent. And Axel Sola has only had one fight in the UFC. We believe it was short notice or relatively short notice, coming in at a weight class above. He fought at 170, as you can see on screen here, against Rhys McKee. Now, in that fight, Rhys McKee was an underdog, even though it was short notice, and he got finished in round 3 by Axel Sola, which was a pretty impressive debut, but not so impressive when you put it in the context of Rhys McKee's record. He's 1-5 in the UFC, so perhaps not that impressive. But Axel Sola's tape prior to coming to the UFC is pretty impressive. He's very well-rounded. He can grapple, he can strike, he's got good kicks. And I don't know, Mason Jones is better known to the UFC fans. He's got a lot of finishes. He's a kill or be killed type fighter. He's got good grappling. He's got a judo background. So when he chooses to use his grappling, then he looks very dominant. He's taken down most of his opponents, but usually does it at the wrong moments. So he was like beating Jeremy Stevens pretty comfortably and didn't take him down until round 3. But he eventually did take him down and did secure the fight. And that was an absolutely amazing fight. Stevens was landing on Jones. And therein lies the issue for Mason Jones. He's very tough, he's very durable, and he relies on his durability in fights. And that's not something you want to see when you're betting on Mason Jones. You don't want to see him relying on his durability. In his very last fight, he was knocked down twice in the first round by Blagioki, and he was out on his feet. And if it was not for his durability, he would have lost that fight. But he eventually worked his way back into that fight. He took Oki down, beautiful judo trip to the floor, transitioned to full mount, and finished him with elbows from full mount. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting and really close fight. And personally, I'm leaning towards Mason Jones here. I may have some bias in my thinking, but for me, it's the UFC experience. So for those that don't know, Mason Jones was in the UFC. He chose to leave the UFC. He wasn't cut. He actually said to the UFC, "Look, I'm not ready right now." He had a couple of tough fights. I think his last fight was against Michael. I'm blanking on his name. Do you guys know who his last fight was before he took his break from the UFC? Mike Davis, that was it, came to me. He lost to Mike Davis pretty comprehensively. Now, Mike Davis was a brilliant fighter back in the day, so there was no shame losing that. He lost by decision. But he's come back and he's just looked fantastic since he's come back into the UFC. So, yeah, I think this is really Mason Jones's fight to lose. If he mixes in his grappling effectively, he can keep Axel Sola guessing. If he just goes stand-up fighting with Axel Sola, I think that's going to be an issue. I don't think Axel Sola is an easy guy to take down, and I understand that he's actually a very studious fighter. So he's actually posted videos of him studying Mason Jones. He did a breakdown of the Oki Jones fight. That's on social media. So that always worries me. I think there might be a fight IQ difference here. I think Sola might have the better fight IQ, but yeah, I'm going to go with the Welsh Dragon. I'm going to go with Jones, on home territory in a blazing war that I don't think ends early. I think this is a war, and I think that Sola will survive, and I think Jones will win a decision, hopefully unanimous. What do you guys think?
Will, you want to take this one, or?
Yeah, not too much to say. Like, I watched a little bit of Axel Sola. Well, I watched his UFC debut last night, and he fought Rhys McKee, which obviously isn't a great start because McKee's unanimously pretty awful by UFC standards. And that was a competitive fight. The big asterisk is that Sola took it on short notice, upper weight class as well. So maybe that muddies the water really on anything you can take away from that fight. But what we saw with Sola was mainly that he has like a kind of karate sort of style. He's quite evasive. He circles a lot, which against Mason Jones, who's a very forward pressure, suffocating kind of guy, could work wonders, but also could sap his cardio potentially. There's that angle, but he looked competent. And he looked like he was up for a scrap and that he was happy to crash the pocket and really swing on Reese McKee. But he was also very hittable. Like I saw about 10 punches that Reese McKee landed on Sola when Sola's hands were like by his side, and he just ate them. Like, fair enough, the guy looks like he has a very decent chin, but like he's hittable. The finish he got against McKee was very much like out of nowhere. It was like one of those body shots. He was aiming for the body though, so like you could see him hurt McKee a couple of like exchanges before he got the finish. So it was definitely a process driven thing. Hearing that he's watching tape on his opponent, always a positive. I do think that is like a plus EV thing if you know that your guy that you're betting is studious, because you absolutely should be. So yeah, interesting from Sola in that regard. And also, he needs to know who he's up against, because Mason Jones is a beatable guy, but also somebody that you have to be wary of. And I think we saw that in the Balaji Oki fight most recently. I think Jones was a big favorite. I think I had him in a parlay. I was quite worried, halfway through that fight, because Oki had him on skates and was like whacking him around the octagon, if I remember correctly. Jones is the opposite of Sola when it comes to the IQ conversation. And I personally think that whilst I did always have high hopes for him, and the decision to opt out of the UFC was a high IQ move from him, and he's gotten better as a result of it. His attitude towards fighting since he's come back is very much not high fight IQ. So he fought Jeremy Stevens, didn't he? A year ago, 2 years ago. He said that he voluntarily didn't grapple and like engaged in a war with Jeremy Stevens, one of the hardest hitters pound for pound the UFC's ever had, because he wanted a bonus. He wanted a performance of the night bonus. I understand it. As a fighter, you got to hustle. You got to make your money somehow, and it's not like the UFC are paying in abundance. But like, that's not somebody you want to bet on. Somebody who will walk headfirst into the path of most resistance so they can get paid more. Like, that's not someone you want to trust with your money. So yeah, Mason Jones is somebody I'm very wary of, because he looks awful until he looks good. You kind of have to there has to be a payoff with his style. He walks forward and gets hit until he just sort of puts the afterburners on and cooks his opponent. I could see him cooking Sola. So I think if we get to round 2 or 3, I think Jones turns the tide and probably wins a decision. But I can't really comment on Sola's cardio and like ability to fight for 15 minutes, because all I've seen from him was upper weight class on short notice, as I said. So that's a bit of an anomaly. I don't really know about that one. So yeah, tricky fight. It's lying quite close. I think it probably should be, but Jones has the experience and probably builds into the fight. So I see why you'd side with him. Yeah, I think Jones 2-3 could be interesting.
Yeah, look, I kind of want to give a Sola a bit more credit here, because I've watched his rise on Aries FC since I think the early 2020s, or at least 2023. In 2023, he fought a guy named Turpal Yunozov, and that was a 5-round fight, and he won that fight via punches in the 4th round. When you watch tape on Sola, the one thing that is a major negative, before I get to the positives, is he is hittable. Like, as you guys have said, like he got walloped by McKee a few times before he got that 3rd round finish. I think his chin durability stems from his cardio. He has always been the kind of fighter to kind of make it gritty and make it tough in there. And if he can avoid the wrestling exchanges from Jones, I think he can at least make Jones look like a bloodied meatbag, right? It's going to be a bit of a gory fight, I reckon. But for Jones here, I reckon he's got to stick to his guns. I mean, he is a world-class grappler. Like, his entire family is just top of the elite, like just the best in that region, at least. Which probably doesn't say much, right? But like, still, it's pretty damn good. I think we're going to see a classic grappler versus striker fight here. I don't want to say that I predict the finish here, because I mean, you can't really predict the finish with these fighters. I mean, these are tough people. But if there was to be a finish, I would probably think that Jones can get the submission. I know that Jones only has 3 submissions on his record, but if he can grow a brain cell and maybe find the route of thinking, maybe learn his ABCs, maybe learn his multiplications, he can at least then know what to do in this fight, because obviously he has to get a takedown. And that's going to help him hugely against a really, really solid, aggressive fighter like Sola, who has, in my opinion at least, pretty good cardio. Like that's the one thing that I noted when Sola fought McKee. Like when I did my write up, I was very I was very much looking forward to his performance in those later rounds, and he did pretty well. So but yeah, I think Jones wins this one, but it's going to be a bit of a weird, close fight and maybe a bit grueling. So yeah.
I still find it really funny that we're actually going to do this. Yeah, the first fight of the night is Melissa Mullins versus Luana Carolina, and anyone who was listening to the podcast has now stopped listening. To be fair to me, last week I gave you the shitty undercard or prelim women's MMA fight, and I gave you a very good read on Piero Rodriguez. So I feel vindicated, and I therefore feel like I'm gonna do it again. So yeah. It's not a great fight, is it? Let's be honest. Melissa Mullins is a English fighter who has fought a very low level of competition. She's got wins over people who she beat Claudia Segula and Alex Silva. Like they're two of the lowest level women in the UFC. We've had in many years, to be honest, not just like currently, like historically. Whereas Luana Carolina has some decent wins on her resume. She's beaten. Sorry, I'm doing this off the top of my head. She's beaten Lupi Godinez, which I think is certainly an impressive win. And honestly, like she has the experience over Mullins, because Mullins hasn't really fought a whole lot of like time in the UFC, and her fights have all been very chaotic. She's very much like someone who stands for much longer than she should and gets beaten up, and then she'll sort of crash into the clinch and try to get a sloppy takedown. And then if she does get her top control time, she goes like she's very high output with what she does on top, which is fair to her. And to be honest, based off of like the tapes that we've seen from both women in their UFC careers, this is kind of supposed to be a striker versus grappler affair. Luana Carolina's last fight against Montague, she got used as a mop. She basically got I think she got like 30-25 on some scorecards. It was a very one-sided beatdown. But in fairness to Carolina, it was a new weight class for her. She was also fighting Montague, who is basically like Kayla Harrison light. She trains with Kayla Harrison. She's very muscular. She's big for the division. She did what Kayla Harrison would do in that fight, and it really showed that she's a training partner. So she's one to watch. But yeah, Luana Carolina is she's not got the best takedown defense. She's good at defending clinch takedowns, which is primarily what Mullins goes for. But she does have a weakness to single and double legs. She's defensively quite good though on the mat, which I think is quite a decent to her credit. I mean, she fought Stoliarenko, who is an armbar specialist, and stayed safe, and actually like did go down to the mat and stayed safe in her guard, which was quite impressive. Also maybe low IQ, who knows? But yeah, Carolina is a well-rounded enough fighter that I think she can handle this test. She's the better striker of the two of them. I think that if they're going to show up at range, I think the lankiness of Carolina will help with straight shots and teeps, versus Mullins is very sort of plodding, forward pressure, wanting to get in close and swing big. But for me, the biggest talking point in this one that really helps me pick a side in this fight is a pick'em. So, contentious either side on the betting. And it has seen quite a lot of movement, actually. The one thing for me is Melissa Mullins' fight IQ. She has consistently demonstrated that she's dumb as rocks, to put it bluntly. She fought Daria Zeleznikova on the regional scene, and the fight there, it's one that I remember really, really strongly for some weird reason. She was getting absolutely destroyed on the feet, and then managed to land a takedown late in the first round, and had so much success grappling. Literally, like knife through butter, completely instantly finished her. It was alarming to see how good someone's striking could be and how bad their grappling could be from the Zeleznikova side. But then they rematched in the UFC like a few years later, and so I was very impressed with Zeleznikova on the feet against Mullins. I was taping Mullins, but stopped and was like, "Wow, who is this woman? She's really good." So they rematch in the UFC. It's pretty obvious that Mullins needs to take her down, right? No, barely landed any takedowns. Literally just stood and traded with her and got pieced up for the majority of the fight. So that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Melissa Mullins doesn't understand game plans. She's dumb as rocks, and Carolina is probably just the better fighter in terms of like competence of all-round martial arts game. So I think Carolina is the side to be betting here. The price has been fluctuating between like -130 and like -110. So maybe, I don't know where it's currently ebbing and flowing at, but I managed to get her at -109, which I'm very happy with. I think this is one of those spots where people don't really give a shit about this fight, so they're not paying enough attention to it. I doubt the tape has been done by the odds makers or many of the bettors, so I think that's why the money line's sort of staying around where it is at plus like a pick 'em. But yeah, I just think that Carolina, if the size isn't a problem and she is in the right weight class, I will say that because maybe a concern there. But I think if Carolina gets the opportunity to show her best work, which she has done, she actually has a very good record against grapplers. I mean, like I said, she beat Lupi Godinez. Which, yeah, she's beaten Podolova, she's beaten Stolyarenko, she's beaten Petrovic. They're all wrestling-based fighters or grappling-based fighters. And I think Melissa Mullins is not as good as some of those names. So Carolina is a very discounted rate, and I think a very good bet. And I will stop talking now. Does anyone else want to suffer talking about this fight, or should we move on?
I watched a lot of tape on Mullins, and the one thing that Will said with like pinpoint accuracy was that Mullins is dumb. She is clueless when, you know, she's being outstruck. I feel bad for her. I don't know what she can do to fix it. I feel like that if she can't get her wrestling going in the first round, second round, or third round, well, hopefully all three for her sake, she's going to get pieced up. Carolina, her takedown defense is very similar to, oh god, this is going to sound weird, but Charles Johnson. Like, I mean, you know how early in his career he always fought wrestlers and always got taken down. I feel like Carolina is kind of like that, you know, like Charles Johnson. I think that her takedown defense is not a negative though, but it's a positive because that means that she's preparing for all these wrestlers. She's slowly working herself up to a point to where she can defend takedowns properly. And even though she fought Michelle Montague and, you know, as Will said, got used as a mop, which always gets me. I feel like even the camp time, like the preparation in the camp is going to help her in this case because Mullins and her wrestling is not special. She can wrestle, she can get the fight to the ground, but she can't really wrestle at the same level as Montague if I was to compare the two. I mean, holy crap, how can you? I initially was on Mullins. Like, I mean, I'm gonna walk into a confessional booth here and say, yeah, look, I had Mullins initially when I did my write-up just last few days ago. I thought she was going to pull this off, and then Will said that, you know, Caroline is better, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, and yeah, that's about it. I think that this is going to be a case in which it's just a classic grappler versus striker fight, and even though Carolina's striking is a bit squiggly, it's still better than whatever the fuck Mullins has on the feet. So yeah, that's my breakdown. What about you, Dom?
I don't have a lot to say about this fight, to be honest. I did actually a fair amount of tape for the Sam Hughes Pierre Rodriguez fight that opened last week, and I just want to say I think Will nailed that one in terms of, you know, anyone who watched that fight saw that Pierre Rodriguez was far better than Sam Hughes, so that one worked out. And a bit like Josh, I think that Will might have hit upon something here as well. I do need to watch a bit more tape on this, because initially, like I was the same as Josh. I was thinking like Mullins, it's in London, you know, just being lazy, basically narrative based. It's in London. She's a grappler, but then yeah, I mean, if you start thinking back through the fights, yes, Luana does struggle sometimes with, you know, grapplers like Montague, but like you say, that was up a weight class. She's had more time to fill in now at 135, and Mullins just doesn't initiate takedowns. She didn't initiate any takedowns in her last fight. So I think even if Mullins does get Luana down, I think that Luana's very live for the win here. I think that it's interesting. You look at their decision props. So the decision prop for both these girls is priced at +150, which shows you the bookmakers have no clue, and they think it's highly likely to be a decision fight. I think you have to go with the experience here. You have to go with the experience and the better striker, the person who's going to do more damage. I certainly am looking to get a Carolina moneyline bet in, but yeah, I don't think that price that you see on screen isn't widely available. I think that a close price is, I think -120 is around. So yeah, there is still close money here, but I think Carolina, you know, pre-tape, I think she's a -150. I will do a bit more tape on this, and yeah, if we take a look at our bets for this week, you can find them here on the screen. In the interest of time, we won't go through all of them, but what I'll do is I'll post links to our Reddit profiles, so you can find posts by both Josh and Will, who post on Reddit. And if you want to follow me, even though I've been stinking recently, I have my bets on betmma.tips. So that's it for the UFC London Fight Night card. We'll be attending in person, as I mentioned, myself and Will, and so we'll report back what it was like next week, and we'll be doing our early leans for the next card as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in, thanks for subscribing, and see you on the next one.